I don't know about everything. I'm going to be Joanne and send it to you. Because she wants to do this. She actually has a website that's called Joy.
Oh, really?
I'm not related. My wife's related. I haven't dealt with her. Her name was I will.
His mother was a shooter. His brother married me. She met you. Yeah.
What? I have heartburn with that part.
You left her really bad this morning.
Hey, that?
Oh yeah.
I didn't see it.
That
We
part
gotta
is not
release
supposed
her.
to
We
be
gotta release.
at all.
I agree. I agree. She
It's all
agreed with that
supposed to
all.
take care of it.
Whites are nice. Oh,
Yeah.
They haven't run any of that refurbished water.
Yeah,
No, it wasn't materials covered.
it's not.
Almost looks like
Yeah,
a fog. Especially the late
yeah, exactly.
the wind stops. It just looks like a cloud.
There's no agenda, is there?
No, she accidentally left it off, so we'll do it in citizens' comments.
I thought, well, I don't know.
The what?
Hello, Sheila.
How are you? Oh, getting ready for surgery on Friday. Getting the house all prepared. That way, make sure there's plenty of food in the house and yeah, getting it all squared away before I'm laid up. That's the big stuff that I had to get out of the way was the meeting minutes. So that's easy. That's easy stuff there. I bring up the system. I check to see if there's anybody new that's renewed and put the card in the envelope and mail it off. So. Oh, I know. Oh yeah, I'll holler. Joe, Christopher, the 3 dogs. So. But yeah, that was the biggest thing. I wanted to get the meeting minutes done and out before I'm laid up. So.
Oh, no, thanks. I'm good. Thank you very much.
You guys want a water?
Oh no, I'm good, thank you.
I'm going to take one, please. Thank you. Oh, much stuff.
Yeah, don't fall in now. No.
Hanging in there.
That's lucky. I got Castroville web portal.
It's a project to rebuild the bridge. In the park. So we're talking about they're going to put a new tear the road bridge down, put a new one. That trail's been blocked off for a while. Because now they got the telephone poles that are all over. They got everything they need to do it. I think they're going to do it.
You reminiscing?
Wish that bridge was still around.
Yeah, you know, everybody got excited because a year or so ago, David Urbanski, the city probably found it. And then he found out, no, that someone told him that, but he wasn't supposed to go search for it because Texas Forest Commission didn't want him to go search for it.
Uh-oh.
And then Josh got all excited when he heard this, Josh Kemp. And then he called David a couple months ago. David said, no, there's no evidence it still survived.
I wouldn't imagine anymore. I mean, once you take it apart and take it down.
Yeah, with metal and everything.
Scraps and things break.
Well, and then World War I and World War II happened, and anything that was scrap metal, reprocessed, reappropriated.
But you look at the Hay Street Bridge in San Antonio, which is very interesting. Have you been on it since they built it? They, 15, 20 years ago, they gave it a walking bridge.
I don't see our Boy Scout
Taking a
here.
bicycle.
Okay, so we take it back over to that, and that was one individual that was
Yeah, because they did that. They had just were doing that when we just got moved down here. So,
That's history. And then when the railroad went through, they had to check a bridge. So the citizens travel over, so and it was a bridge, and it was taken to storage yard, whole storage yard.
Well, I told him. Yeah, I told him that night, but I didn't send it. I didn't have an email. I didn't communicate with him.
All right, Deborah, just let me know when you're ready.
Yes.
All right, we're going to call this meeting to order at 5:30. Let's start with a roll call.
Sheena Martinez, District 1.
Bulgaria District 2.
Joe King, District 3.
Harold Stein, District 4. Herb Dyer, District 5.
And Darren Schroeder Mayor, all accounted for. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
If you don't mind, please remain standing. I'll give the invocation. We don't have the pastor here. Actually, Councilman King, would you like it?
Sure. Thank you. Watch over us, guide us, guide our citizens. Keep our citizens in your thoughts, and give us the courage to make decisions that are good for our citizens, and give our citizens the understanding to be guided by us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, we'll start with citizens' comments. Would anybody like to speak for citizens' comments? Come on up.
Hi, friends.
Hi.
Hey, my name is Donna Jacklich. I live a couple doors up the street on 1311 Fiorella, historic Holler House. So I was here several months ago saying, hey, we got a lot of speeding problems, and I've been here a long time, and just concerned about that. And so you said, no worries, we got this electronic system coming. We're gonna document all that, and it's gonna be awesome. And so I find out later that the electronic system doesn't really work like it's supposed to. But when it was here on Fiorella Street, it actually did slow some people down coming south, but not necessarily north. So, yeah. So I'm here again with concerns about lack of stop signs on Fiorella. And I got to tell you a funny story. So I don't know if you guys know, but when the city was first incorporated way back in the early 1900s, like 1940-ish, whatever, my grandfather was the first mayor. What? So yeah. And so within a couple of months of his meetings, believe it or not, Fiorella Street stop signs was on the agenda, and we've got to do something about slowing the traffic. I guess it was, I don't know what it was in the 40s, I don't know, horse and buggy, maybe some cars, I don't know, right? I know, I wasn't here, so yeah.
That would have been like 47, 48.
Yeah, let's ask you
I would be
now.
offended if she's looking at you, Judge.
Well, you know, here's the scary part. I'm not that far apart in age of these guys. So anyway, so here's the deal. So I understand you have to do some studies. So I thought that electronic system was going to do some studies, and I guess it didn't because there was some compatibility with, I don't know, electronics or whatever. So I saw on your agenda that you had a stop sign under consideration for another street somewhere or whatever. So I guess I'm again asking you guys to look at Fiorella Street and the traffic. There are 2 stop signs to the highway. And other than that, it is a racetrack. And the funny thing is, with the actual electronic signs, they actually dropped them off about 8 and picked them up between 4 and 5. So, which really, if it was able to collect data, which I understand now it didn't, you know, you put it in the wrong time. So, you know, the racing time is after 5 o'clock, of course, and during the night. So, bottom line is, I'm still waiting for the stop signs. I have volunteered to dig the holes myself. I will buy the stop signs. I saw some at the citywide yard sale for sale, and I was going to buy them, and I will dig the holes myself. So I'm asking again that you guys look at the speeding. I, of course, would prefer it to be right at, I guess it's Madrid and Fiorella, right in the historic area. I understand you cannot put in sidewalks. I get that. It's expensive, although that would be great because that is a historic walking tour area. So you have these people that are walking this area and cars that are exceeding 25 miles an hour. So once again, I ask you to consider putting a stop sign. Again, I just want one at that particular stop sign. I'm sure other people want ones at their corner too. Rather than a study, let's look at people who have been there for decades, not people that have been around a minute. Because many of the new people have been around, honestly, a minute. And I don't know that there's a need for a study. I think there's a need for me to get signatures so that you actually have a history. I've got people that live on my street that have been here for 80 years. And so I don't understand why we need to take any more time. This has already been on the agenda since 1940-something. So I'm just saying, give me a stop sign, okay? So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. You guys have a good evening, and best of luck with your meeting.
Feel free to hang out for the discussion because we'll talk about it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we can. Well, we can't.
That
That
what I want?
is on the discussion.
Is
for
it on
later.
my street?
We can
No.
talk about it during the agenda item. So if you'd like to hang around, please feel free. Otherwise, we'll talk to you afterward. You are welcome either way. Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Anybody else want to come up for citizens' comments?
David Mers, 148 Village Path. Got it all written down this time, so I'm just going to read it.
Nice.
This is a little bit about the airport zoning ordinance, which is in your packet. The map included on what's labeled page 12, I don't know where it actually falls in the packet, but at the end of that section, there's a picture of their zoning overlays. And it's kind of hard to read because it's fairly small and the picture isn't super high resolution. But as best I can tell, it designates the Country Villa apartments, portions of Country Village neighborhood, an existing daycare center, an existing church, and a whole lot of land that's planned for, or that's currently planned for development as either A1 or B1. It's possible I'm misreading the map. Again, it's very small. So everything I have from here on assumes that I've correctly deduced what is assigned to where. But the A1 and B1 zones limit these areas to 1 and 4 dwelling units per acre respectively. This would probably preclude the construction of any sort of missing middle housing like was discussed in the speaker series, or even anything dense enough to be particularly walkable. Country Village, based on me and my neighbor's house, is about 3.7 dwelling units per acre. Both zones prohibit schools, daycares, and libraries. and A1 prohibits places of worship. This means that any new development in those areas would not be able to access these important services without driving a half mile or more, probably along 90. I also did not notice any specific allowance for rebuilding, although it might be in there. It was a long section. This would seem to imply that if the apartments behind my house, which are 4 dwelling units per 0.21 acres, which comes to about 19 dwelling units per acre, way past the limit, the daycare across the street or the church next to the daycare, if any of those burned down, they would not be able to be rebuilt if these zonings were applied to them. And so changes to the zoning ordinance, either before it takes effect or in the future, to remove some of these restrictions and increase this rather artificial density limit would not guarantee we get walkable neighborhoods that can serve residents' needs, but leaving them as is presented in the packet seems to guarantee that we won't get neighborhoods that can serve residents' needs. Because it would require variances which normal people don't have the time or money to deal with. If I've tragically misunderstood something, please tell me so when this agenda item comes up, and I would be very relieved. All right,
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have anybody else who wants to speak for citizens' comments? All right, we were going to have something on citizens' comments because we accidentally left it off for the Eagle Scout project, but I don't believe we have him here. Okay, so we will...
Be official next time.
We'll be official next time when we hear about an Eagle Scout project. All right.
So the next one, we'll be able to ask questions and bring up concerns?
On the Eagle Scout. Well, yeah, you've already got it ready for your packet and ready to go.
Well, I won't be here at the next meeting
We'll call Ellie.
because there's one part in there that is not allowed,
Perfect.
so.
So since it's not on the agenda, we can't talk
Right.
about it, but
So could I email it to you?
Yeah, yeah,
That way it
email
can be
me,
addressed at the
sure.
next meeting because I'm going to be out?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. And it is, yeah, that's something we don't have to necessarily during the meeting, but before the next meeting would be good.
Yeah.
All right, next item is consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have minutes for October 11th, 2022 City Council meeting, resolution on declaration of surplus equipment, and quarterly financial and investment reports. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right, next item is mayor's report. I don't have anything visual. I'm just going to share a bunch of the stuff that's coming up. So upcoming events, there are all kinds of things going on right now. Just to touch on some of the highlights, the Daughters of the Republic of Texas the Alsatian chapter is hosting about 115 attendees participating in a hayride, walking tours of downtown, tours of the Beery House, and an Alsatian stew dinner with a brief meeting plan. So they're working on that on Friday night. Saturday, they're going to have over 140 attendees, with 130 being daughters, children, and sons of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas. And so they'll have Alsatian dances, tours again for the guests who cannot be in the other DRT meeting, and a French-inspired lunch. So it's great that they're getting together and celebrating this tremendous history here. We are also going to have Pioneer Day this Saturday, 10 to 5 p.m. at the Landmark Inn, followed by the Boo Bash at the Regional Park. That's going to be from 5 to 8 p.m. Saturday is going to be a very busy day. Thanks to the 41 junior ROTC cadets and 25 other friends of the park, the Boo Bash is ready to go. To date, 26 businesses, organizations, and/or individuals have signed up to host Trunk. In addition to the popular Trunk or Treat, the free activities are scheduled as followed. We have Touch a Truck, hosted by Devin Fredrickson, tattoos. I hear Scott is going to sign up for many tattoos.
Absolutely.
Face painting, pumpkin toss, bingo, take your own photo contest, and there will be 3 food trucks available. So everybody's encouraged to wear costumes, bring a flashlight for when it gets dark, and it all begins at the Orange Tent by the volleyball courts. Lots of fun. The citywide yard sale, this is the twice a year. This will be November 5th. So registration is available right here at City Hall. All payments must be made in person. cash or check at City Hall. So many things. They came by ship. So this is put on, this is the Castroville Conservation Society that's putting on, they came by ship. It is, sorry, the CCHA, Castro Colonies Heritage Association. That'll be November 5th, 5 p.m. at the Living History Center. Now it's limited to only 50 passengers. Are there still room for passengers?
2 or 3 left.
We have 2 or 3 left. So if you're interested in that, please contact Mary King, also Phil King. His information is on the website if you don't already have it.
Tell him you're going to be in.
I'm going to be at it.
He's one of the actors.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that I am one of the actors, but I will be participating as one of the people. So then we have Veterans Day at the airport. We will have I believe we have a city council meeting before that. I just wanted to give everybody a heads up. Dream Flights is going to be flying around some veterans, and so that's going to be very exciting. Of course, the Candlelight Tour of Homes, December 3rd, the Old Fashioned Christmas, December 2nd and 3rd. So a lot of things going on. Next item, Council Liaison Board Reports. We'll start with the Airport Advisory Board. And that's Councilman, and the Airport Joint Zoning Commission. That's Councilman Stein.
Okay, I do not have a report on the zoning commission, but the advisory board did meet on October 3rd. I think you already mentioned the Veterans Day Dream Flights coming up on the 12th. That was discussed. There was a little bit of concern on the paving project going on with the runway to make sure that didn't interfere with that event. And I think David is taking care of that. And that's about the only thing on the agenda permits need to share. Their next meeting is scheduled for November 7th.
Great. The next is Historic Landmark Commission. I guess there was no meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm sorry.
Library Board meeting?
Was a pretty good meeting on the 13th of October. Talked about the numerous things that are coming up. They're doing painting pumpkins. All the clubs are back. STEM, art, Day of the Dead cookie decorating. The D&D playing is starting back up. They are going to be having making wreaths and macrame classes firing up here soon. They're going to have a run on the 23rd of February for basically Love Your Library. And they're going to be having t-shirts made for this. They're making up a map and everything, so more information to come. Trunk or Treat, they're not sure if they're going to be participating in it. They thought that the junior library friends were going to be running that, but that group has no more participants at this time. They are working on an interlibrary loan program in between the library and the Medina Valley School System. Let's see here. Homeschooling initiative is opening up. There's a lot of concerns about the library not having events during the daytime, during the week for the homeschool kids to do. They're trying to figure that out right now. But one big thing is everybody wants the library to do more things and everything, and their space is limited. So what they're going to do, just like the parks did, is they had those of us on the board take the survey and give our input, and they're going to build a more robust survey. And then they're going to have us on city council take it and give our input of how to make it a more robust. And then they're going to send it out to the citizens to take. That way they can make their plan of attack on how to build the library better, game plan of when they're going to outgrow their footprint. That way we can use that for possibly when more developments come in or something, having them, contribute funds or something, or land or something to get us a bigger, better library. So they're working on that right now. They're thinking about, for Old Fashioned Christmas, creating and selling calendars. That way bring in more money for the library. So, but that's everything going on.
All right, thank you. Next is Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Councilman Dyer.
They met on the 20th of October, last Thursday. There was a very spirited discussion about the new rates, the soccer league rates. Many of the soccer parents participated. I think, to my knowledge, this is the first time they've been there, but there was a lively discussion about the rates, and I think people are beginning to understand that it costs a lot of money to make these fields ready to use and to keep them that way. So everybody seems to be willing to participate. They gave an invitation to City Council to come and watch 2 soccer games last night, 7 and 8 o'clock, and I think there was 3 or 4 of us, maybe more, that were able to go and look at it. For myself, that's the first time I've seen a night game under the new lights, and I was very impressed. The field is very well lit, and I think it's an excellent addition to the park. The park board approved a recommendation that the Eagle Scouts replace the Scout Bridge, and I don't know when we're going to have the briefing, but we're going to have a briefing soon in the council about it. The pool heating is moving along very well. I don't know, I was going to ask Scott, do you have an actual estimated date when it's going to get turned on?
Very soon, gas is just completed this week.
Yeah,
So I think we're doing some dry runs and very soon.
they've done a lot of work. They've done trenching for the new gas line, and the equipment's all installed, and it's very close to being turned on. We got some bad news at Lions Field. The lights at Lions Field on the baseball diamond had to be deactivated because we've got some serious shortfalls in the wiring. Heads up to the City Council, we're probably going to be seeing a couple of $100,000 bill coming our way, unexpected, to replace. With regard to the RV park, the advisory board approved an expenditure of a little over $6,300 to hire a commercial recreation specialist company to come in and evaluate the RV park and give them a plan that would help them to become in compliance with the City Council guidance that was issued in 2019, which was to develop a plan for improving our park, RV park. And this is the first really concrete effort. So it's a good step in the right direction, and they're moving on it, and I think they're going to pick up momentum once they get this report. It'll help them get started. And that's all I have on the meeting.
Great. All right, thank you. Next is Councilman Carey. I think that the Impact Fee Committee was the only one that met. Is that correct?
I don't think they have met yet. I think they're meeting on the 12th.
Well, and I have to apologize, I think I put y'all in November on this,
Yeah.
and I'm getting ahead of you.
Yeah,
In fact,
I
the
noticed
meeting
that.
did meet.
Yeah.
They
It
did
was
meet,
on-
okay.
It was October. Sorry.
So I guess we have no updates
I
from
did
that.
not attend that meeting. I'm sorry. It must have been slipped by me.
I will,
Please.
that was the same night as the Joint Airport Zoning Board Commission, so I met very briefly with that group prior to the meeting, and then followed up with them after the meeting was held. They had a brief presentation from RESPEC, who did the impact fee study for us. There weren't any major issues or questions. They are recommending approval of the impact fees to the council, the City Council, and that will be on the November 8th City Council meeting due to state, and state requirements for publication. So we'll have a public hearing on November 8th, and then council deliberate that item on the 8th as well.
And I have received their recommendation that will be in the packet for the 8th.
Perfect. All right, great. Thank you. And there were no other special called.
I'm sorry, also, if someone's interested, we do have it on the website. It's under the community development page, and you can go in and see the presentation that was given, and also the proposed rates for anyone that is interested.
Great.
And
Thank
it's
you.
in the public notice.
Perfect. All right, anything else, Scott?
When we are done with reports, I'm going to kindly request that you reopen citizen comments so that we can have a presentation from our Boy Scout that's here to do it. I want to clarify for council and for those participating, there was miscommunication between me and the city secretary about getting this on the agenda, so I'll take the blame for that, because I was supposed to have sent the presentation to her, and I did not do that. And I'm sure if I had, that would have been the light bulb that would have reminded her to put it on there. But anyway, be that as it may, so the way that this will proceed is he will do a presentation with your permission, and because it's not on the agenda, you won't be able to ask questions, but what I would ask is kind of what we were just saying just a second ago. If you'll direct questions to me and CC the mayor, ultimately, the mayor would be the one to sign off on it anyway, as far as the BSA is concerned. So if that's all right with y'all, I think we'll proceed.
Yeah, it's just a reminder, it's not discussion during here. We'll have the presentation. I'll reopen citizens' comments.
Are you ready? Have you gone through the memorandum? Okay.
Yep. So we'll reopen citizens' comments at 5:54.
And I am going to be your favor. And you're going to tell me when you're ready to move forward on the presentation. I'm about to have it up for you.
Please introduce yourself and your project.
Hello, I am Eliezer Arroyo Ayala, and I'm going to be presenting my Eagle Scout project.
All right, so the presentation is up. I don't know if you can see it, but if you'll tell me when you're ready for me to move to the next slide.
Possible I could get the laptop? I've got some speaker notes.
Yeah, you could actually. That'll work a lot better.
Oh, yes. Can you also, for citizens' comments, can you give your address as well?
Name and address.
Name and address.
EJ Arroyo, 2109 Geneva Court.
Perfect. Thank you.
As you can see, this is my Eagle Scout project proposal. I have already proposed it to the Parks and Recreation Board and the Friends of the Castroville Regional Park. What is an Eagle Scout project? An Eagle Scout project is the opportunity for a scout to demonstrate leadership while performing a project that will benefit the community. It's an opportunity for a scout to prove that he has the leadership skills required to pretty much have a project that will benefit the community, resulting in a win-win for everybody. What is my project? For my project, I plan to rebuild the Eagle Bridge while still honoring the original design by using the same aesthetic, meaning the bridge should look about the same as the original design, but it will be better and essentially last upwards of 30 years. Here's some pictures of the current bridge right now. As you can see, it's deteriorating and is going to become a safety hazard sooner than later. This is a picture of the material list. Some things are highlighted to show that they're grouped. It's kind of just for building purposes rather than for you guys. But as you can see in the bottom, the total estimate should be around $2,200. It is a little higher on the sides of building a small 25-foot wooden bridge, but that is so that it can sustain longer than 30 years. There are going to be phases of the project. The project will be done over several weekends, and within those weekends, there will be phases of the project. The phases go as follows. Phase 1 would be to plan, such as the meetings, the blueprints, and preparing for the worst possible scenarios. Essentially what I'm doing now, going through and asking for the approval of building the project, it's the longest step, but it's the most important. Step 2 would to be demolition, taking down the current bridge that is there, just removing it. Phase 3 would be to clean it up, the site, for old materials, clearing the obstacles and hazards for new construction. Step 4 would be to gather materials, such as make sure that everything on the buy list is bought before we go ahead and start constructing. This is important so that we're not just stuck without anything to do because we don't have screws yet. Phase 5 would be to prepare the site for construction, place the telephone poles and the concrete footings, and cutting the wood down to size so that we can put it together really easily. Phase 6 would be to assemble, put it together like IKEA furniture. It should be that simple. assembling the railing girders, staining the cedar, and preparing to install the railing. It's simply just drilling the holes and making sure all the wood is cut to size. Step 7 would be to finalize. We have our own perfect little Golden Gate Bridge. It'd be to complete the bridge, prepare for the public use, clean the site, and remove all the tools. And then phase 8, if possible, reopen the bridge, kind of have like a little grand ceremony about, yay, our bridge is back. How long should this take? We went through basic estimates. It should take around 4 weekends from demolition to reopening. It can change due to amount of volunteers, the weather, holidays, basic things that would require some volunteers not to be able to come or be able to come. What has happened so far? As I've mentioned, I have met multiple times with the Friends of the Castroville Regional Park, Mr. Frederickson, Mr. Connor, Ms. Delavan, and the Parks and Recreation Board. Kind of showed them what's going on, kind of asking for approval, a little bit of both. What's next after this meeting? If I do get approval, I'll present to my troop committee for approval. Afterwards, I will apply for the Eagle Border Review, and after getting approved, I will begin construction. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I believe...
Well, do you recall the questions that Parks and Rec asked you at the last meeting?
They asked me sort of just to provide pictures of the current decay of the bridge, which I've provided.
Also recall they were asking about fundraising, which you explained the answer to that, right?
Yes. Until I am able to go through my Eagle Border Review, I'm not able to start fundraising for the project because they pretty much have the final say in which I can and can't do this. So I'd have to get the approval from here and then go through them to start fundraising.
I think those are the main questions, and you added some pictures that weren't present, so that's good. So, like I said, if y'all have other questions, which I know Councilman Martinez had at least one or two, please send them to me, CC the mayor, and I'm not sure that those questions get answered and sit back to you.
Can you show just the two slides that show the photos?
The current condition?
Yeah, the current.
Yeah, right now it is all covered up in
Right there.
yellow
Right.
tape.
That one right there. I keep seeing that. I didn't see the other photos, so that's what I was looking at. Okay.
So they do have this, it's blocked off so that you can't be used because it is a safety issue right now. The Parks Board, for y'all's information, the volunteers, not the Parks Board, the Friends of Regional Park and volunteers made some repairs to their bridge, which is built in a very, very similar style not too long ago. It's a pretty big effort. It kind of followed, honestly, what you've laid out as your timeline. They went through almost the exact same process, demolition, repair, multiple weekends, all of that. So I think you're spot on.
Great.
That's it.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate you presenting. All right, next item, briefing from the Airport Joint Zoning Commission on zoning districts and proposed restrictions. So for this, we have Chairman Eric Cherry and Board Member Mike Arnold.
I do have, Mike and Eric, for your benefit, I do have our GIS up.
Oh, good.
Which shows the limits. Now, this is not as expertly drawn as the map that accompanies the draft ordinance or the draft regulations that you got, but it does show you kind of what the footprint is, and we can zoom in and look at A, B and C, and B2.
Excellent. Okay, real good. First, I just would like to thank y'all for your service to the city. I know it's difficult. I've been there. Are you familiar with why we have a joint airport planning and zoning board? Everybody's good with that. We don't have to rehash any of that. It is a board and not a commission. There are two differences in those auspices. So just to let you know, we've done this for now about a year. since we started. It would have been nice if the FAA had kind of a planning tool that, detailed compatible land use around airports, but they don't. It's pretty much generic, and you get to kind of determine what is compatible land use, what's not compatible land use. Actually, what's not compatible land use, but, you're winging it, so to speak. So we looked at several other examples, other airports, some near our size, some a little bigger, that have actual planning and zoning boards. There's not a whole lot out there that do.
Yeah, there's one example that the TxDOT had given us to look into, and so we started with their restrictions and how they did their drawing of the layout. But we've learned a lot about, and TxDOT, I'll get here, does have a pretty good standards for this. So we've used that as a model also, and just recently we've had some other from out of state being brought in to kind of give us examples of what's going on. The FAA part here that Eric was talking about was really, it functions more like the IRS, They don't inspect everything, but when they do, if you violated it, then they're really going to come down hard on you because they can't really look at all of this. We're fortunate to have someone from the FAA, formerly with the FAA, Chuck Friesenhoff. He's been helpful in guiding us in terms of how the FAA views things. And our goal is, and Mayor, you said this numerous times, is to protect the airport because it is an asset the city has, and we have a required to maintain, and then respect the property use of the citizens at all costs. But we have to do both, and that's the challenge. And Chuck has helped us a great deal in terms of the interpretation of the FAA, and then we've been looking at all these other documents for the last year and trying to understand it ourselves. We have a cross section of people that some are involved in aviation, some are not. Some have been corporate pilots and Southwest Airlines pilots, and some are just private pilots like myself. But we've got people from who have no aviation knowledge, and so we're all been trying to figure this out ourselves. That's the background.
That's a good background. The board is, of course, comprised of 4 members, 2 nominated by the city of Castroville, 2 by the county. So they pretty much deliberate over the items that we are looking at, and then vote on those. If needed, if there's a tie, then I would vote on that. But generally, it's up to the county and the city representatives to deliberate over what we're looking at. The primary thing that we focused on from the very beginning was safety. Okay? It's one of the 3 most important things in aviation. Safety, 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 right? I don't know if you've seen the news lately, and there have been notable, unfortunately, airplanes that have crashed recently. One, an F-35 that cost us a lot of money. Yeah. But private airplanes, helicopters that have crashed, and what we want to try to do in protecting the airport, protecting the citizens around the airport, and protecting the use of the airport is very important. A lot of us see airplanes coming in under VFR conditions, beautiful day, sunny day, airplanes flying in and out. So
Windows will scan this list automatically. Press the space bar to select the highlighted option.
One of those Microsoft things. You know how they are.
City computer.
You know those Microsoft.
That, I believe, was user error.
User. A disclaimer from the Microsoft.
ID10 area?
ID10T.
But as I was saying, we see planes flying around, nice beautiful day, coming in for a landing, taking off. In height restrictions, obviously if you see an object, you can get out of its way. When you're doing an ILS approach, which is an instrument landing, you have distances, altitudes, and you can't see out the windows. So
instrument approach is really just where you're in clouds, you have no forward visibility or limited forward visibility, and you're flying the instruments in front of you in the cockpit for a safe landing. And so you have a chart that gives you the altitudes and the locations that you have to be, and nowadays it's a lot easier with GPS. But for example, just less than a mile from the end of the runway, the airplane has to be in one of the approaches, there's several, you have to be at 1,500 feet, and then you're descending rapidly from that point to the runway. And so it's, it's precision and non-precision, and but the idea is that's where you should be, but if every pilot does what they're supposed to do, and weather permitting, et cetera. So the minimums are 200 feet, so when you get to the end of the runway, if you can see 200 feet and see you're at 200 feet above the runway and you can see the runway markings, then you can land. If you don't see it, then you have to go around, and so you're going back in a pattern in the soup or the clouds and trying again or going to an alternative airport. So that's kind of the basis of that.
So worst case scenario is what you plan for, right? VFR is the easy stuff. ILS, that's the more tricky stuff. The first thing we did, what we had to do, was define a jurisdictional area, which we did. FAA, we looked at all the various criteria. We adopted the FAA criteria, which the jurisdictional area is 5 miles from either end of the runway and 1.5 miles to either side of the runway. And that's the jurisdictional area for the Planning and Zoning Board. The city of Castroville, as you know, comprises relatively a small portion of that area today. Of course, in years to come, it may be the whole area, who knows. But everything that's existing stays the way it is. Nothing, of course, changes. Everything's grandfathered. If you look at the approach pattern, and we talked about that, as you come in from the north, coming down off the slope of the hills. Remember, there's a hill up there, so remember our height altitudes. As you're coming in either over Country Village, you're coming in over Alsatian Oaks, or right over Walmart, okay? And on an ILS day, those altitudes would be 400 feet maybe?
Well,
at that point?
At that point, yeah.
Yeah, about 400 feet. So that being said, compatible land use around an airport is to try to keep the density, population density, within those danger areas at a minimum. High density population. Housing, of course, is not a good thing. 10-story buildings at the end of a runway is never a good thing. Isn't it New Braunfels that has the outdoor theater?
Yeah, well, in New Braunfels, I served on their advisory board for the city there for a number of years. So they had, before they got their rules and restrictions in, they had a drive-in theater with 2 screens directly in the line of one of their main runways. So when you come in, you have this bright screen. If you're at night, obviously you're watching at the theater, that can blind you. If you've ever, you're driving in a car, you get to see the headlights in front of you, they're bright and you can't see. Well, that's one of the things that they've allowed that is really going to restrict flight in the future for them, potentially.
So a lot of things were just logic, right? You don't want to put a drive-in theater at the end of a runway. It makes no sense at all. So that's the premise that we took off with, and I think we have a really good workable document now that kind of has some less restrictive covenants to it, and maybe more restrictive covenants in some aspects. The city of Castroville, planning and zoning, pretty much takes, precedence within the city limits. Outside of the city limits, which a lot of it is county property, of course, we applied theoretically what the subdivision ordinance and housing densities, things like that, would be within the jurisdictional area. In your Cs, your outer areas, those are your least restrictives. I think it's, 2? Yeah, 2 and 3?
Yeah, well, we've made C1, which is on the far west side.
Carved.
C2 and 3, which is north and south, the very furthest, with really no restrictions other than getting a permission from the FAA if you build certain heights. And they have just a website you go to, you put in your latitude, longitude, and it tells you whether you need to go any further, or it's perfectly fine, don't worry about it. And
so this is C3 I'm showing everybody, and then C2 would be the southern area below the river, kind of near LaCoste, I guess.
Past LaCoste.
For example,
South of LaCoste.
we looked in the meeting, and David Kirkpatrick, airport manager, who's the person liaison with us, he looked at the website for the FAA and all the way out to Rio Medina. And so put in the lat log, and it says if you're building something greater than 31 feet, you have to go to their website and fill out the information. Now, it would be granted if you're just building something, 50 feet, 100 feet, whatever, but they want you to go through that step to verify so that they know. What you don't want is somebody to build a huge antenna or a big water tower that's directly in the path of the runway that could be a potential hazard. So, but they're not, they want that to happen. The problem is how do we enforce that? How do we get people to understand that that's required? But that's really the requirement in C1, C2, and C3.
And as you know, it's, just to give you a visual, it's kind of like, they call it the upside down wedding cake, but it's kind of like the Coliseum idea. The further out you go, height restrictions, you can build up higher and higher because you're further out.
C1 does not have any use restrictions, is that right?
Yeah, we changed that to in this final version here, it says C1, 2, and 3.
So just to clarify for the folks who can see the screen, this says B1 and C1, and in part that is because C1 or B1 is a, I want to say concave, but it is a semicircular shape, if you want to think about it, that kind of follows the Part 77 map, which I should be able to bring up in a second, but that's why C1 isn't outlined in here, because this was using rectangular shapes, and that was a goofy shape to try and include. But it's encompassed by the area that's labeled B1 and C1. So a portion of that is B1, the portion closest to the airport, and the outer edge of the remainder would be C1. So I'll try to see if I can find it.
David's map has that drawn out. I guess it's bluffs.
Yeah.
Is kind of where C1 is, and it's pretty well built out already.
Right.
So anything that's existing is not impacted. And so it's
Now, just to start with A, of course, is airport property, okay? Primarily. It's, the runways, the approach surfaces, front and back, and that pretty much encompasses almost, 90% of A.
Yeah, it's not quite that much, Ray, because it does extend out.
On the end,
1.5 miles.
yeah, on the end. So
The airport property kind of stops there for short of 90, of course.
right. But for the most part, though, it's, the majority of it is airport property, just a little bit longer. But again, this is areas directly into approaches, takeoffs and landings, okay, is predominantly in A. B, when people think, well, why do you go out to B? Well, B is the pattern. So when somebody's flying, they come off, or when they come in, they enter the pattern, and Mike can explain more about that.
Yeah, just real quickly. So if you're flying in great weather, there's no clouds, you're flying a pattern of a lock shape, and so you're on the downwind, base, and final. So you're out half mile away from the runway, or greater depending on the speed of your aircraft, maybe up to a mile, and then you're coming the pattern. Whether it's the south runway or the north runway, you're following, so you're going to be right over the top of those houses, et cetera. And so, and that's very normal, but it's also creates noise for the residents. And so, one of the things that imperils airports, and you look at California as a good example, there's several cities that are trying to close their airports because of the noise, because the city did not control the growth and it completely surrounded the airport, and people are complaining about the noise. Well, and I don't get into too many details, but they've proven that the decibels are not the problem. It's just the constant buzz over the house that they don't like. And so either way, that it can become a real problem in the future if you don't establish control before then. Instruments are primarily straight-in approaches, and there are circling approaches if you to circle the land at another side, at the other side of the airport. But for most of those, they're right down the runway coming in. So that's the differences between the two. And so B1 and B2 is really mainly trying to protect the VFR patterns. And right now, our pattern has been on the right side, the east side of the airport has been the pattern, whether you're landing north or south. Typically, in most airports, you do left turns, and that's left turn pattern, so you would be on both sides of the airport. We're not doing that at Castroville, and that's the way it's always been, but that puts us right over the existing school. So every flight would come right over that. So we also have parachute jumpers out there, and so they're also landing on the east side of the airport. And so anyway, that's the reasons for B1 and B2.
Just to go over some of the hazards, obviously, number one, height hazards. Those are, know.
Yeah, I am. I'm trying to make you dizzy.
He's moving it off.
I'm trying to figure out how.
I can't see it, but
I'm trying to figure out
Actually,
how.
let's, all right, so if we can, let's go through the
I'm
restrictions.
going to plug that so that we.
What I'd like to do here is have you just go through high level what the restrictions are. I want to provide some feedback and commentary. I'm going to ask Judge Schuhart to come up and do the same, and then we'll hear from council after that. So let's wrap it up with the restrictions, the recommended restrictions. And Scott, maybe, are you going to bring that back up, or?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is bring up,
You broke
there's what they call the Part 77 map, which looks kind of like a stadium. And if I can pull up the map that has that, then it'll make the discussion of B1 and C1 a little easier to understand. It'll also show those, it'll give you a reference point for height, the way they measure height, but it's going to take me a minute.
Okay, so let's just start walking through. If you can speak kind of generally in terms of boundaries for each one of these, I think that would be the easiest way. So north, south, east, west boundaries for each one of the zones, what restrictions you're recommending, and I'd like to wrap this up in about 5 minutes, if that's all right.
Okay.
Does that give you enough time?
We'll make it happen.
All right, thanks.
So it's sometimes dictated as A1, but it's Zone A is what we established. And I believe I have this right. We've been using overlays. It's about 1.5 miles of north and south of the runway is Zone A. I think I have that correct. It's one dwelling unit per acre is the limitation for that. Obviously, Alsatian Oaks doesn't meet that, but any future growth in that area would be of concern. This is a maximum non-residential intensity is 250 persons per acre. So I'll make a real quick example. Walmart, for example, they're on numerous acres. I don't know what their acreage feet is. And you think, well, they have a lot of density. Yeah, in the store, they do, but you look at it in terms of the total property, which includes parking and back of the store, et cetera. So they certainly fall below that density when you include all of that property. The prohibited uses for A is residential, except for very low density residential. So saying we don't really want a lot of residential there. And that's the one dwelling unit being recommended for A. And then it has hazards to flight, and so there's a whole list of hazards to flight, everything from, ponds that attract birds and things of that nature. So we'll keep going here. We don't want any hazardous material places. You don't want a big refinery or a big propane tank yard right in the path of the runway, and A as well, natural gas. Children's schools, daycare centers, hospitals, anything where you have a mass population of people there that could be impacted negatively should something happen. And that's what we're suggesting there. And this A is the only one that mentions places of worship, schools, theaters, auditoriums, stadiums. We don't obviously want dumps or landfills that also attract birds. It's a real hazard for airplanes to run into a bird. And then waterways that create a bird hazard. So it's really not an issue here, but you wouldn't want to create a large pond or whatever right real close to the airport either for the same reasons. B1, it's got 4 dwelling units per acre, and I believe this is the city standard for those areas already. Obviously, some developments may have a different, but right now that is the city standard, 4 dwelling units per acre. There is no limit on the, go back over here and get my heading, I'm sorry. No limit on the persons of residential, the maximum non-residence intensity. The first one had 250, and there is none in any of these other zones. So I won't mention that again, but only A has the 250 person restriction there. So B1 and B2 are exactly the same, so we'll cover this pretty easy. So it's hazards of flight to theaters and auditoriums, dumps and landfills, waterways, all those things. It says children's schools, daycare centers, libraries, hospitals, and nursing homes. I forgot to mention that there is the other developmental conditions on this is it's called an navigational easement dedication, and so I think I have this right. That's the FAA going to make sure that any development that you're building of height is going to go through that website of the FAA. So. And then, and if they decide, they may want to if you were going to build a tower, they may say, yep, this one concerns us, and we want to have a FAA flight study to see if if that's going to be a conflict. But that should be pretty rare from happening.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that is in place anyway by the FAA?
It is.
Right.
It's
So you're
standard
just
today.
codifying it in our rules, right?
Yeah, it is standard today, yes, sir.
Yep.
And so it's just, most people don't know about it, and so it becomes a problem.
Right.
So, all right, and then last thing here, so hazardous flag, I mentioned all those. B1 and B2 are exactly the same. Cs, as we said, have no limits in terms of any of those factors. Just the airport disclosure statement is what we're requesting. That is different than the FAA. The airport disclosure is on all of these, and that is that if you're if you're building a development in these areas, you really need to make sure that the residents understand and get them to sign and acknowledge that they're moving into an area close to an airport. If you think about it, the city of San Antonio has paid millions of dollars funded by TxDOT and FAA for sound noise abatement for houses, going in and replacing windows and all kinds of stuff, and they're still doing it. And so no one signed anything, and so they can say, well, we didn't know there was an airport when we built this house in 1965. But anyway, we don't want to see Castroville in that same situation where we want people to recognize where they're living, and if they're not a concern, great. So that's the quick version of that, sir.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. So let me just run into a few things. So first, I got to thank you. This is, I know it's thankless work.
It pays well.
Yeah, I know, something like that. No, I appreciate all the work that you put in. I know that it's been very frustrating. It's been very controversial. It's been a ton of work. So I want to first and foremost thank you for taking this on. Thank you for working through kind of like all sides of this. I know it's difficult. I do want to hit a couple of key points, and I've talked about them during your meetings. I've been told that I've been a little bit heavy-handed in this, and I will continue to be heavy-handed in this because I'm very concerned with this. So again, I'm going to talk you through what my concerns with it are, and then we'll have the judge, and then we'll have the city council, because I don't want to be, this is not the Darren show. I'm just looking out for the things that I think are going to cause us some issues. I do believe, emphatically, we have the same goal, is to protect the operations of the airport, and that is the current operations, the expansion operations. As we've gone through this, the expansion operations are not significant. It's not a tremendous difference. We're not talking about turning this into a commercial airport. We're not bringing commercial airliners in. This is a municipal airport that is fully viable. I firmly believe that financially, that aesthetically, that use-wise, it's a great thing for the community. It benefits us financially. It brings extra business. It brings extra people. It's a great asset for the area. So absolutely, we have the same goal here. And we want to make sure that, the risk to the city, if something happens to the airport, we're at millions of dollars of exposure in repayment. So it is far beyond what our annual budget is, so there's definitely a financial risk to us. And I completely agree with the notification requirements with signatures. I'm concerned that we don't have a way to enforce that in the ETJ or in the city, so we're going to have to figure that portion of it out. I will tell you that some of the concerns that I've got with this, honestly, I think the jurisdictional area is way too large. I think that if you look at population density, you've said before that it follows the current ordinances, but we've told you that the ordinances are changing. We've looked at other things. We don't want to, with the map that I see here, you almost can't have a church, you almost can't have a school. You already have schools that are in these zones. So it limits the viability of Castroville unduly. So with the FAA requirements that are already in place, I would like to see the FAA requirements being spelled out in this so that people know exactly what to expect. So again, making sure that you understand that you're moving into, you're buying into, you're going to be a part of a community that has an airport, and there will be airline traffic. When it comes to things like the water, I mean, when I look at the river, we've already got the river here. We already know that west of the airport, because of the flooding concerns, they are going to have to create some kind of retention, some kind of detention. There will be water in there. When I look at, other airports, Ennis Airport, it's surrounded on two sides right up to the runway, and that is still a fully viable airport. So when I look at
Orlando's built in a swamp.
So, and that's kind of the point, is that
The whole state.
if we if we limit this to strictly what the FAA requires. I know it's always tempting to go bigger, but I think that the thing that concerns me with that is that we already have so many non-conforming uses. If you're saying it's a problem going forward, then I think it's a problem where we are. We have 2 schools, 3 hospitals, 2 apartment complexes, RV parks, and they haven't been a threat in the past. We haven't had accidents there. I don't see why they are now. I think that we need to limit the size of the zones. If you talk about population density, your highest population density is sitting right in front of the airport runway, and that is Highway 90. Population density, it does not get any higher than that. If TxDOT is not going to limit the amount of traffic that can go down Highway 90, then I don't see why we would increase that for people that are living there without a completely valid reason. And I don't believe that there's been enough backup to go for that. The concern that I have from the city standpoint is that inside city limits, we have to enforce this. If we have to enforce something that is unenforceable because there are so many proven examples, then you put the city at risk. We either have to not enforce it, and then it basically makes all of your efforts moot, or we have to enforce it, in which case we may undertake tremendous legal fees. And so that's why I have to encourage you, again, thank you for what you're doing, and this is not disparaging what you've done. This is just looking at it from our standpoint, our risk aversion. We should not close the airport. We should not put the city at risk for either not being able to enforce something or having to enforce something that puts us at legal risk.
It's hard to serve 2 masters.
You're not serving 2 masters. You're serving one. You are serving one. And that is doing the right thing for the community. And that part of doing the right thing for the community is doing the right thing for the airport. But you're not serving 2 masters. You're trying to do something that finds compromise, that is reasonable, that is government. We have the opportunity a lot of times to have governmental overreach, to put too many restrictions on people, on citizens, and it's not the role of government to limit the viability of living in a place. It is to enhance it. And so part of enhancing it is to ensure that we have good airport operations without overly limiting people. So that's, let me see if that's the gist of it. What I'd like to do is to have Judge Schuhart come up from the county, and I know that you're presenting in front of the county as well, so I appreciate the open communication coming to the city. You've had great open meetings, you've invited people. I wish that more people would come. And Judge, if you don't mind standing up to the...
Well, no, I don't mind at all. I actually didn't have a speech prepared, so what he said. But I'm going to give you another perspective of this, because I really haven't, I just now looked at your A1, A2, and all that stuff, okay? But having spent many hours in the courtroom on condemnation cases and property rights, people, I'm going to go from the landowner's perspective. You have people, and I don't know if you've contacted everybody on the south side, on the north side. I mean, I see 2 things. I see the people on the south side, and I don't know if anybody's here from the south side, but I know there's landowners down there, and when you start limiting their use of land, you're taking away their value. And you're going to be in a fight, because there'll be lawyers come out of the trees, and they're going to fight this because you're devaluing something that they own, and without good, maybe with good reason, but for them it isn't going to be with good reason. So I'm just telling you to be careful about limiting the use of landowners, because they're going to lose value in their land, and you're going to take something away from them. I have a little issue, and just having heard this for the first time, that the people to the north side of the runway are going to be grandfathered. The Alsatian Oaks will be grandfathered, but yet you're going to enforce that restriction on the people right past it. And that's what I heard you say. I thought
anything that's existing would still be existing.
I understand, but Alsatian Oaks is being built right now. Am I correct? There's not a house being built.
It's planted.
I don't care. There's not a house there.
It's true.
All right. So now you got a problem with the people right past there, because you're going to impose those restrictions on them because they didn't get here in time to get their stuff platted. And I'm talking the legal side of this from y'all. I see a whole lot of legal issues when you start being over restrictive on people's land. And, you know, the state of Texas does not, there's really the people that run this state are against people that have the power of eminent domain. And while this is not eminent domain, it is something very similar to it. And so I would just warn y'all to be as least restrictive as you can on people, because the citizens of this community are going to cause a problem. And I do want to just in kind of in gist, one of y'all said, you know, using California for an example. I said, please don't do that. Don't ever use California for an example, okay? Because we don't want to be like them.
We were using airport crashes that weren't in the state of Texas.
Oh, okay. And the other thing I want to say, that just from common sense, I fly a lot. So I fly in and out of San Antonio Airport, and I'm sitting there, you're flying over at the end of those runways. If you go 5,000 feet over both ends, there's houses everywhere. There's buildings. ACOG's old building was, I used to watch the belly of the plane go over the top of it, and it was 8 or 10 stories tall. So I'm wondering why the FAA would require all of this when you're sitting there in San Antonio and they've already built all this stuff. I guess I haven't, I'm coming on the back part of the dance here, so I'm not really knowing the front part, but I am curious about that.
San Antonio's paid a lot of money.
So I understand.
Mitigation of some of those issues.
But you know, it's San Antonio where there's a plane coming in every minute. We're Castroville, there's a plane coming in, I don't know what the numbers are, but how many a day are coming in, but I just have to warn you all to be careful about that.
So some of the land you talked about, like North Alsatian Oaks, okay? In those zones, most of it, there is really housing density restriction in the Georgia. I mean,
Right.
it's just not-
Not now, but there could be, and that,
If you're in A1, you
No,
can
A1
be, right?
is close, pretty close to the airport.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, just to the other side of that station would be A1, the end of A1. But then you go to 4 units per acre,
Yeah.
which is the current Castroville subdivision ordinance.
again, that is
So-
inconsequential.
Well, I'm just.
It is
you have to-
inconsequential.
I understand that, okay, but you have
So-
to have something, what do you want to draw to?
Nothing.
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 So should we go?
Why
to-
should you talk about
should we
population
go to
density?
the-
I'll be clear about this.
should we go to
I
the
believe that
North
you should
Colorado
not.
Texas area? They have a zoning before, should we go there? I mean, should we go to
The
there?
point that I think that we're both making, and again, I'm going to back off from this for a second, because I want to make sure the council has a chance to, but I've been very clear, you know, from my standpoint, if you put, I don't know that there's legal precedence to put a population density. I don't think it makes sense to put a population density, and you should not use the current zoning ordinances. So many of our ordinances are out of date. So you're using something that I explained to you at the very beginning that we are in the process of changing. So if you're,
We could use North Texas Regional Airport,
why should you use that though?
right? I mean,
What is the
that's-
justification
they
for
have-
it?
Gentlemen, I'm going to interrupt here
Thank
for
you.
just one reminder, as the city attorney, we're here to receive a briefing, and so we need to make sure
Perfect.
that we're receiving a briefing.
Thank you.
And we can, if we need to have some discussion and action, the next time around, we need to note it that way.
Perfect, thank you. All right.
And I'll just respond to that and say, from the county standpoint, we have subdivisions going in right now outside of the county that when the developer comes in and tells the county, I'll put in a sewer plant, I'll put in the water system, guess what? Their density gets better. So on the other side of the river there, I think if trying to keep up with Scott's moving of the map over there, which made me cross-eyed sometimes.
Sorry, I was trying to help, but
It looked like
you know how
past
it
the
goes.
river over on the other side, you get up in those fields before you get to 471, your A1 is covering some of that. And so I think, you know, I agree with Darren, you cannot just sit there and go with what's existing right now, because we're in a time where everything's growing out here. Developers come in and want to make it highest and best use, and the Commissioners Board's going to do whatever we can as long as it fits what the county wants. And I only have 67 more days, so I'm, you know, this fight will continue. I'll be gone.
You're not counting here, John. So,
Thanks very much for your service, I appreciate it, but that's all I'll say. So
In
thank you.
keeping with the briefing, what I would recommend, much like we did with the Boy Scout earlier, there will be a public hearing at which, if the council wants to be present, we will notice that there could be a quorum of the council. I think we'll do that anyway, just out of an abundance of caution, so I need to remind you do that. But that's on November, do you remember the date? 14th?
14th. It's a
Yeah.
Monday.
Okay.
It's here in City Council.
So on Monday, November the 14th, the Joint Airport Zoning Board will hold a public hearing to discuss exactly what was presented tonight and to present it to the public for their input. I don't believe there's another meeting, y'all have another meeting between now and then, do you?
More than likely, what we will do is have a meeting directly after that.
Right, but there's not a meeting between now and then, is there? No,
there
yeah.
won't be a
So,
meeting between
so
now.
this is the draft.
This is it.
And so the draft, this same draft that has been presented to council will be presented to the public, and that would be an excellent opportunity to provide feedback. That's the purpose of a public hearing. So if the council, it would not be action by the council. There could be a quorum of the council present, but you will not be taking action at the meeting because this is not your item. But it is an excellent opportunity to provide that feedback and do so in a public setting. It'll be here at 6 p.m. on November the 14th, which is a Monday.
The board will meet in here.
In here.
Scott, can I make a suggestion? And I don't know if this is possible, but knowing that Arnie's coming on and Cindy's coming on, wouldn't it be wise to have them apprised of what y'all are going to talk about on the 14th, since they're going to be actually on the board?
I know Cindy was at the last meeting,
Right.
Arnie was not.
Okay.
so-
Arnie's been there, Cindy's been there.
All right, so I just want to make sure the two new board members.
Yeah.
And Arnie has been copied on
All the
items
drafts.
that have gone out.
He's well read.
Yeah.
He's
Can-
Arnie.
He's well read, he's Arnie.
He probably defined it before he ever said it.
Hey, Scott, can I email you my questions or concerns?
Well, yeah, I would love to hear them, just
Well,
as a
just
staff.
to somebody, because I won't be there.
Yeah, yes, yeah, absolutely. And I would suggest, I mean, Eric is the
Okay.
chair of that board.
Okay.
So if you send anything, first, I would recommend anybody who has any questions, and I'm not trying to throw Eric
Oh,
under the
yeah.
bus
No, no.
on in any respect, but I would recommend you send them to him.
Okay.
When we did the publication, the phone number that we listed is the city phone number, because this is a volunteer board.
Right.
They don't have an office or anything, so we're going to take the calls and questions and issues, and we'll be doing the same thing. We'll be forwarding them to Eric.
Okay.
I've just asked that when staff does that, they CC me and David, just so that we have an awareness of it. But yeah,
Okay,
you can send it to
thank
me and Eric.
Okay.
Great, all right.
You're good?
Thank you guys again for your
Thank you,
service. Thank you
gentlemen.
for the briefing, I appreciate it.
Okay.
No good deed goes unpunished. Remember that.
I had only one question.
Yes, please.
Can you show us on that oval map where the water tower for Alsatian Oaks is going to go?
Yeah, well, I
What
can't.
zone is it going to be in?
I can't show you where it's going to go exactly, but I can give you an idea. It would be in A1. That's the first answer. And the Alsatian Oaks kind of goes back here, and I can't remember if this is the Dickerson property, but my belief is that it will be in this corner right here.
It's just going to be farther north.
In that area.
Yeah, it's supposed to be in the back right corner of the property.
Zoom out just a little bit so we can see the runway.
Right, is this the back right, or is that the back right?
Go,
I think that's it.
oh, you don't have the city limits up. If you bring the city limits up,
Yeah,
you'll
I'll
see
show-
that it's up in the, it's outside of that approach
So
zone.
give me 1 second, and I'll do that.
And are we allowed to make any comments?
I think the comments need to be directed to me.
You'll need to open that menu
Let's,
and jump in.
let's send
Oh.
all of your comments, recommendations, suggestions to
Yeah,
Scott
there's a
and,
drop down. Hit the
David.
drop down.
Yeah.
There we go. Now, and then
My apologies, I thought that we had this on here.
No, I think if I check it,
it's,
Yeah.
it
It
doesn't,
should.
it doesn't automatically.
There you go.
No, you don't have city
No.
limits there.
okay.
Yeah, just open it, click that box under that drop down menu.
Well, that doesn't click.
Or there's more.
Yeah, well, that is the more. That's what I'm saying.
Hit that box right there.
I can try that one.
Yeah.
That's city limits fill. But,
Oh, okay.
you know what, honestly, I think it's this, hold on. You can tell this is a new tool.
Yes, it is.
I think I have to click this, and then it'll show it, so yes, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, there it
So,
goes.
So
you
there
go
you
to
go.
that, zoom into
So
the Alsatian
now-
Oaks, go up, and to
Oh,
the
look, I
right,
see
keep
that.
going up, I think it's in that upper northeast corner. It's in
Right
it's
here.
Yeah.
there,
It's in B.
Yeah.
So
I don't
it's
know where I
outside of
pointed
the
to
approach
before,
path.
but,
It was over there.
yeah.
Okay.
So if when you,
Yeah,
when we look
they
at,
do, it's up here.
yeah, so if it's in this corner, then it's in B, it would be what we were calling G2, potentially.
So that one's already been.
A1.
It's been, I think.
Outside of A1.
Then they approved it.
B.
The first guy says you got it.
Yeah, we're actually still working on that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Did anybody have any other questions for me? All right, great. Thank you.
Scott, do you have my email address? I know David's got it.
I,
Oh, Deborah's got it.
Deborah's got
if you
it.
want to, if you want to announce it for everybody to hear, that's
It's,
fine.
yeah, echerry68@gmail. Echerry, ECHERRY68@gmail.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, thank you.
I'll put it in the spam block.
All right, I
At
appreciate it, guys.
gmail.com, right?
Gmail.com. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
I want to recognize Mike, Arnold, thank you so much for all your help. I know
Seriously.
you're going off. I know this has been an especially difficult time for you personally, dealing with a lot of issues, and doing this on the side, I really, really appreciate it. It's been, your efforts have been recognized, not always expressed in the terms that you'd expect from gratitude, but we really do appreciate it, so thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I got those treats you requested.
Oh, yay.
Oh, yeah. I'll drop them off at your office.
Did anybody look at you sideways when you asked for them?
No, actually, they're all over the place.
All right, great.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. All right, next item is consider and take appropriate action on an ordinance amending the FY 2022-2023 comprehensive fee schedule. These I think we looked at last time. Scott, you want to go over this?
Well, in the packet, there is a sheet that tells exactly which ones have been changed, so it'll make it easier for you. Leroy fixed that up, and then we have the ordinance to amend the previous ordinance we just passed. And in the exhibit, they are highlighted now, I believe, in blue.
Yes.
And that's what's going to be changed, if you approve.
All right, any questions on that? I know that we talked about that last time, but.
I've got a
clarify, please.
comment.
Yes.
I know we talked about this a lot, and I think I'm probably the only one that's a dissenter, but for the last 23 years that I've been living here, minus the last 2 years, I could always go to the copy of the approved budget and open up to this chapter, and you could see the cost for every hangar on the airport. It was published. There was no question about it. Now, I'm not questioning how it's done, who did it. I'm fully aware of that, and I'm not opposed to it. I think they've done a great job, but I think we have an obligation. I would like to see it published, just like it had always been done, because there's no other way to know. If you want to go back and do research, unless it's in the actual budget, you're not going to find it unless you ask for special reports and Excel spreadsheets. And I think that's a disservice to the community. Population deserves to know what they're renting their hangars for. I'll stop at that.
And the answer is no. Because we made a policy decision, the council made a policy decision, that this would be treated like rents. And for the same reason that you can't go to an apartment complex and say, what's your rent for this year? And have those rates published and then have them live by them on December 31st of the same year. But that's why we don't do it. What we can do, and what we have done, and what we will do, is in our monthly reports, report the revenues. So I want to be clear, I work for you. If you change your policy, I'd be happy to do what Councilman Dyer wants me to do. But as you can probably tell, we've had multiple conversations about this, and the answer is no. We're not going backwards unless the council tells me to go backwards and to change our policy back to the way we did it. The way we're doing it is the way we're doing it, which is allowing the airport manager to make as much revenue from the airport as he possibly can. And that means not establishing rates once a year.
And what is our vacancy rate right now?
0. So not only is it 0, but again, we have a couple of Phantasm hangars that he's managed to eke out of storage space, which is awesome. But again, you get revenue reports every month, and if there's a concern about revenue, I want to be very transparent about that. But you know, there's a reason we don't do it that way. So out of respect to Councilman Dyer, I understand, but that's the way we used to do it. We aren't doing it that way anymore.
When we, on this part here, could we have, because it says consult airport manager or city administrator for further details. So if somebody looking to see what our fees are and everything, can we have a contact number or something in here for them to contact?
So there is at the airport.
Or an email?
Yeah. I can certainly add that. I know that there, again, we have a waiting list of
Yeah.
something like 60-plus people right now,
Right.
and they've found a way to contact us. I'm assuming it's on our airport page. It says, hey, if you want to lease, but I can put it we can put it in here. I did want to point out, the one that I have up was not one that was discussed at the last meeting, but it did come to my attention after we spoke. So I want to make sure that this has been brought to your attention, that you had ample opportunity to either support it or not. That's the banner placement fee. My understanding is we had not changed this in quite a while. It was $75. I have two concerns. Number one, that's excellent marketing. Like, the banner that goes across Highway 90, from a marketing perspective, from a guy that used to be in the private sector and do this kind of stuff, $75 is a steal. Like, that's
$150.
And we only, by policy, it's only nonprofits that can do this, right? So we do have a low rate in part for that reason. But the concern was, this was too low. I mean,
You've got
it's
3 men in a truck out there. For
right,
at least an hour.
right.
That's
So
it's
we're-
170 at 150. It's low.
Right, and that's kind of my thought too, but I think 150 is fair. And still, considering these are nonprofit agencies that are paying the fee, still, it's fair, right?
I have a question, two questions. One, why is it per hour? Because it's 1 hour minimum, but does that mean that it may take longer than that to put up if it takes 2 hours?
Yeah, generally, I'll be honest, generally we just recoup the same fee. We can delete the hour if you want to, because to my knowledge, we've never billed them back for an hour. They pay the fee, they put in the deal, pay the fee. So I will make a note to strike, ask Deborah to make a note to strike the 1 hour minimum from that.
And per hour, so per hour.
Yeah, so it's just $150.
Banner placement's $150.
Yeah.
And the other question I had, why did Respect suggest that we put turbine fees back in? Where do they think that may come into play?
I was so frustrated by this.
Because
They just thought, out of an abundance of caution,
Okay.
that in the future, there may be turbine, you're an engineer, yes, they said that in the future, we may see turbines utilized in our system, whereas now they are not. And so for that reason, even though we never had used them, and that's why we took the fees out, as it happens, since they were doing the impact fee study, I said, oh, no, you should leave those in. So we put them back in.
Because we've never, ever used it from what your
That's
discussion in the
correct.
past, but it has something to do with a meter type thing in a water system.
Yeah, better safe than sorry, I guess.
We really want fast water.
I think all of the other changes, as Deborah noted, have been highlighted in blue. All the other changes, which there are only 2 or 3, were ones that you all had specifically requested, and we changed. I did move the inspector fee. The inspector fee, we did clarify, is indeed for utility inspections. So when a commercial development or a residential development or some other major development is going in, and there's a need to expand water or sewer infrastructure, and inspections are required that are apart from the inspections that are paid for as part of the permit. So our staff has to go out there and do that. That's what that fee is for, and that's when it's assessed. Sometimes KFA performs that for us, and they bill us at a regular hourly rate. So this is enough. The fee that was in there was enough to cover if we had an outside engineer do it, or if we had our own staff do it. Yeah.
Any other questions?
And once this is passed, this will be on the website.
All right, great. Then do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt amending ordinance comprehensive fee schedule for the city of Castroville for fiscal year beginning 1 October 2022 and ending September 30th, 2023, with the additions, corrections that we just annotated.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great. Any further discussion?
One question.
Yes.
Scott, where is the, in this, under the Park and Recreation for the cleaning of
I think it was omitted. You're talking about the dump fee?
the dump fee?
Yeah, it was just omitted.
So we're not gonna collect that even for?
No, yeah, it's, well, it should still be in there, but it should say, free, no charge.
It says dump station residential use must present latest utility bill, and it's at zero charge. We
At
left
the
it
bottom
in.
of the page.
So we left it basically the way it used to be.
It's under RV and camping.
Look, top, you'll say fees, Parks and Rec,
What page?
and then,
Oh, yeah, there's not numbered.
yeah, there's no page numbers, but at
It'll
the
say
bottom.
line.
There it is, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's
We
down
need
the
to
bottom.
add page.
Okay, got it. That's it. I didn't go back one page too far. Okay, that's it.
Okay, great. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. All right, next item. Discussion and appropriate action / direction on a request from the Historic Landmark Commission on Realtor disclosures on historic properties, authority on small structures in historic parks, and plaques for historic structures.
You can look at the mayor.
You know about this?
Please.
Oh, this came up at the, at their last meeting, which was prior to our last council meeting, and that's why I didn't give a report on this, but I knew it was coming up. Part of the, if you remember, the city council asked the Historic Landmark Commission to give input on the parks and future designs of the parks. So one of the, and one of the questions related to that is that right now, the Historic Landmark Commission, gives certificate of appropriateness to structures in town that never come to city council. Well, if they were kind of asking us, because these are so important, the two parks, the other parks in town, Houston Square, September Square, if they make a decision on something in the square, is those gonna come to city council after they make a decision? Does that make sense? Because right now, normally they make it, those things don't come to us. So they're a little, what do we expect of them? Because if they come back and say no structures at all in either of these two things, or any of our other parks, then, historic parks, then, or is council okay with that? So I guess they were getting they wanted some feedback from us. And then the second thing had to do, in fact, Priscilla's here, maybe, I'm sorry, maybe she ought to be addressing this.
Priscilla, do you mind?
He's the chair.
She's chair of the. Did I get the first one right, Priscilla?
Yes.
She's mastered being able to see with her eyes open. It's quite impressive.
There's a couple, let's start with September Square. What we've heard from the public, from Foreign Legion, from Conservation Society, and several other things is they want little or nearly no changes to September Square, which we understand. We don't want to get away from working with what came out in the Parks Master Plan for these two areas either. So just as an example, we want to keep the walkways, the veteran walkways, and the bricks that the families can buy, the veterans can buy, and so on. But can we issue a certificate of appropriateness for some? We don't know what we would need to come to y'all with, just like he said. Can we do the walkways just within HLC? Is that okay? When somebody wants to buy a brick, would we have to come to y'all for that, since this is so important? We know that based on the input that we got, September Square is going to be very, very limited to changes at all. Nobody has wanted anything to happen within the inside where we set chairs up when we're going to have an event and so on. benches. If somebody wants to put a memorial bench in, would that be something, if we put in our ordinance, that we're going to be updating the ordinance, if we have a specific number that we'll allow there, so it doesn't get overcrowded and look like a bunch of church pews sitting all around everywhere, can we define a number in our ordinance and the materials they need to use and the type of bench that it would be? And if we define that in our ordinance, if somebody wants to do something as big as a bench and it still fits in our ordinance, would we have to bring that to y'all? Because it's getting to be a bigger structure now. But the definitions, we hope we'll be able to expand there. We already know the public doesn't want any more big memorials. There's not any place to put any more big memorials in September Square. Houston Square may be different because that's big. But basically right now, guidance on September Square would help us to get the ordinance done to bring to y'all. Houston Square is going to be different because it's much bigger. The parks plan already has some specific things that we want to see done too in it, so we're going to try and stay with the park plan. There might be a difference in memorials and benches on Houston Square, but that's the kind of guidance we need. How far can we go approving without having to bring it to y'all?
Will the benches for September Square just be for veterans or military people?
Well, yeah.
To keep with the.
Yes.
Well, is it a Founder's Park too?
It is a Founder's Park too.
So would it be Founder's?
It is a Founder's Park, and, we had a bench put in that before we realized anything getting done needed to come to HLC. I mean, the COVID thing woke us up to that.
Yeah.
And the Daughters of the Republic had a bench put in. It just appeared one day. And so I think benches would be limited to a military or a founding family.
Okay.
Now, the bricks, I think, can be, it wouldn't necessarily have to be a founding. That was not the intention when Garden Club put those in, that it had to be founding in the bricks, because that's flat, that's not standing up like a bench or something.
Right.
And then the other side would stay veterans.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's the kind. Other than that, we've already got our lighting that has been put in. The park plan has a walkway from London Street on the back side to get people in without walking over the lawn into the structures that are there right now, into the memorials. That's in the park plan that we want to go ahead and get that done. But other than that, it's going to be a lot simpler on September Square, I think, than it is eventually going to be on Houston Square.
And I think that maybe a good approach with this, I know that a lot of times we look at like one single owner of something, and I think this is more of a collaboration. With September Square, I think if the Parks and Rec Board with Devin's oversight and the HLC, I think anything that happens in here, you come to an agreement together. And if something like foundational needs to be approved by council, I think you still give council that ability to make those approvals. But as long as HLC and the Parks Department can come to an agreement, obviously any veterans organizations that want to be a part of that would be a part of that as well.
What would you consider foundational?
That's a great question. I think it's something, if you want to come up between the Parks Department and HLC with any of these standards, I think that you collaborate together and say, these are the things that we want to control, and I think that you're looking at the right things. Anything vertical. So anything vertical that changes, any kind of structural, like think about, I had a couple of the business owners around there ask me about parking. And I know that was on one of the previous designs. I think parking would have to go in front of both of them and then in front of City Council, because it's more of a city structural thing.
Okay, are you talking about parking at September Square, or how they're going to, or the parking at Houston? Because that's both addressed, both those places are addressed in the Parks Plan.
Right. As long as it's addressed already in the Parks Plan, I think that it follows the Parks Plan. If it has to deviate from the Parks Plan, And maybe that's the best place for it to reside. I'm throwing out
Well, and
ideas.
I think what would be helpful for council and for me, for staff, for HLC, is to better understand and delineate the purposes for the HLC board. What is its purpose statutorily? What can it enforce? Why does it exist? And then start there, and then start to distinguish between, okay, well, then this clearly falls under HLC parameter, because I know that within the historic guidelines, so I was just trying to look up and find, there were certain things that have to go to the HLC, and certain things that if we had a historic preservation officer at HPO, that the HPO would actually have final say on. It doesn't have to go to HLC because, well, it fits in these categories. And the reason I bring that up is because when you talk about bricks, for instance, the surface level stuff, my interpretation, and having looked at this in the past, and this goes back to a recent project that happened where landscaping was a big component of that, landscaping and things of that nature, those would go to the HPO. And it wouldn't even go to HLC. Whether it was on September, because it's all the historic properties, of which September Square is one. And that's the reason the HLC has dominion, if you want to think about it, over September Square and Houston Square, is because they're on that survey. These are two of the properties that were identified, along with the other 67, or there's 66?
96 is
So the
total
other
96.
94?
The other 94.
So these are just two of the 94. And for each of those properties, that's how that's delineated. Do you have enough familiarity to speak with this now, or do we need to come back and provide this at another meeting?
I do not have enough familiarity here with this, although what I'm hearing though is a good idea. Many communities do that, so they delegate. You know, if it's from here to here, you guys do it, and God bless you. And if it's from here to here, you know, bring that forward. And it's just a matter of establishing what those parameters are going to look like. What can everybody agree to?
So I actually can read, actually, let me do this. Sorry. I turned it off. Turn it back on.
Paul knows some things.
David, is that on over there?
Were you going to ask? I was trying to ask a
Yeah,
question.
he's like this.
We have 2 benches at the square now?
At
Just two.
September Square,
At September Square?
we have 3 now. 2 that have been there for years and years and years,
One
and the one
recent.
that was put in that just appeared.
Well, I would encourage us to engage a designer to help us determine how many and where any future benches should be.
That was what we talked about.
Okay.
Limit the number, where they would be placed, the materials used, and the style.
Get that on paper.
That's
so
one of
that
the
when we
things we
check
know
off
we
those
want to put in.
locations,
So if
we're done.
that's what our question is. If we have those parameters in there, that's going to be a vertical structure.
Right.
Would you let us work within those parameters without coming to you? Give them
Well,
or do we need to come to you?
Let's take a look at
I said, let's take a look at this and then see if it answers our question, because I'm not sure if it does or not. But
Oh.
this is, what I'm looking at is the,
Ordinance.
these are 2017 ordinances. So it talks about reviewing authority. It means the historic preservation officer is a reviewing authority for applications regarding repair, other than routine maintenance of a structure or property designated or pending designation as a historic landmark or located in an area designated or pending. Material changes in any doors, roofs, windows, stonework, woodwork, light fixtures, signs, sidewalks. So there's sidewalks, fences, steps, paving, and other exterior elements visible from a public right-of-way which affect the appearance and compatibility of any structure or property designated or pending designation as a historic landmark or district. Part of the reason that it's important to understand where the delineation lies is because when people come in and they're filing for a permit, staff needs to know who to send them to. And so on the HBO side, one of the things that we're exploring right now is a partnership with KFA. They actually have a lady in their organization that's trained in historic, she meets the training and definitions of a historic preservation officer and has expressed a willingness to serve the city in this capacity, recognizing that it'll just kind of be on a one-off basis. I think she actually lives in this area as well, so that's very helpful.
Is this the one that Brianna knows?
Yeah.
Young lady
So I think we met her at one of the lecture series. Right. She came up and introduced herself. So that's where this stems from. So the idea would be that person who's trained in that is able to do these things. And then Historic Landmark Commission would only be the reviewing authority for, and I say only, but it's for these specific things: reconstruction, alteration, addition, stabilization, restoration, or rehabilitation of a structure or property designated or pending designation as historic landmark or located in an area designated or pending designation as historic district. Demolition or relocation of a site or structure designated or pending designation as historic landmark. New construction on real property which is located in an area designated or pending designation and use of the structure designated or pending designation as historic landmark. And then the historic preservation officer may at any time for any reason defer judgment regarding a certificate of appropriateness to the Historic Landmark Commission. So there's the catch-all. Yeah. If, for whatever reason, the HPO says, you know what, I really want to get to the HLC's opinion on this, then they would seek it. But all the things that you mentioned, in my mind, fall under HPO, not under HLC.
Yeah, we used to,
So-
when I was on the commission, we had an officer.
Yeah, we had one, and
Until the last few years,
Brianna really kind of works that way with us now, because she can issue a certificate of appropriateness to, she goes to the guidelines. If what they're doing meet guidelines, like they're painting or something, they can go straight to the guidelines. If the color paint they want to use is in the guidelines, we ask them to they don't have to come, it won't come before HLC, but we have a form, and we developed that because when somebody starts painting one of the old houses, several of the neighbors will be calling. Did they come to HLC? Did they get this approved? Well, there's certain things you don't have to approve. So we ask them, just go to Public Works, talk to Brianna, and we have a form they can fill out. She approves it without coming to us. So it is the things you read, major stuff done.
So that's why I want to clarify for September Square and Houston Square, the items you discussed fall under the HPO designation. However, given the historic importance and character of those two, of Houston and September, what I think would be ideal is to have HLC come up with a list of the things they desire to restrict, right? That may not be really identified, because I don't think those two properties are specifically identified anywhere in ordinance, right? So what this would be, and this goes back to some of the concerns that we had during the COVID memorial, is it would be things like declaring September Square as a founders and veterans park, and so that might set some limitations on the types of functions that can be held there. I know, like for instance, we were approached, well, it's a park, can we have a movie there? From staff, there's not a definite no, you can't, but our advice was no. Let's not do it at September Square, because really that's supposed to be a sacred ground of some sort.
Yeah, that's why the American Legion for the past 100 years have had their ceremonies there.
Right, and the ceremonies that are held are usually of a very reverent nature.
Correct.
So,
And so
but there's no guidelines, there's no written guidelines about that.
That's what we want to get into the ordinance.
So I think this could be handled one of two ways. Either, just like we've been doing all night, council can make recommendations to the HLC and say, hey, these are the things we'd like to see at Houston Square or at September Square. And you can do those individually and just send them to Priscilla. Or vice versa, HLC could come up with what you think is your list of kind of guidelines for how September Square and Houston Square, which are, I think you're right, they're probably might be mostly the same, but yeah, I think one of those Venn diagrams.
There's going to be some differences.
There'll be a lot of overlay, but there'll be some different areas. HLC could come up with those guidelines and submit them to council, but my strong recommendation from staff is simply that whatever happens, it gets codified. Like there's a guideline that's actually adopted and made part of the 2017 ordinance for these two locations.
And I think the second one's a good option, because the HLC is supposed to be our subject matter experts. And so that way they can codify and then do the recommendations to us for us to give our feedback on that.
Well, question for you, on the things that are under the purview of the HLC, so the 96 homes and structures, is there a process for that? Is that the HLC is the final authority on that? Or are there instances where they would actually come in front of council?
Yeah, there's instances where we had to bring stuff to you.
Okay.
What was that? Because in the ordinance.
Variances,
But in the ordinance, does it actually have?
That's what I'm saying, in the ordinance, I think it's, HLC is the final authority on these 96 properties if there's not a overarching zoning reason, right?
Yes.
Things that
Right.
zoning
Zoning
matters,
type.
PUDs,
Right.
that stuff still has to come
It's
to
been
us.
rare that we've had them
Yeah.
come to y'all for anything.
I remember one
and
that
I
you had to
can't,
bring up.
you
But
know-
it was for an ordinance of
Yeah.
variance application.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, if there's a variance, if somebody's
Yeah,
asking.
Yeah,
like-
so those items go through,
I
but
think-
otherwise, they have final authority.
Yeah.
So I think that as long as we codify this and make sure that it's well-defined in this, that we have the HPO as the, with their
Like
responsibilities.
it works now.
And that falls under city staff, whether that's internal or outsourced.
We hope.
And then the HLC under your purview. If that needs to change, if somebody comes back and says, I think this is wrong and this is something we need to do, then that could come in front of council to redo the foundation. But I think it's good to leave it basically where it
Let us
is.
come up with what we've talked about, that what we will restrict to, what we will allow in the bricks, what we'll allow with benches, because I think everybody's on board with nothing more than benches going in there now. And now the other thing that might come up on September Square in the Parks plan is the vertical parking at the back.
Yeah.
That might come up again.
Mm-hmm.
And, we went through all of that once before.
I was involved in
We
that.
had to determine whether or not the rocks that are back there were historic. They're prehistoric, so you just don't have to, and that was a nightmare, the way all that came up. But because that's in the park plan.
Well, I think maybe establishing boundaries for the park, like
Yeah.
these are the boundaries of the park. Because like Houston Square is very similar in that respect, in that the park, there's a central area, and then there's parking for the Catholic Church.
Everything else.
And then there's a parking for everybody else
Right,
that exists at Houston Square. So you may want to delineate that.
okay.
One thing, you're talking about the plans that were in the document, but those are not final plans. And when
The
the
master
council
plan?
accepted them, they
Or
were
master
accepted
plan.
with they're the master plan. They're just
Recommendations.
guidance, they're not the
Okay,
plan.
well,
So
but
don't-
they're in there, and
Right.
I don't want
But
to.
they're not the final plans.
Yeah.
For either park.
But they are in writing that y'all.
If they
did-
get in the capital improvement plan,
They're-
that gives them
yeah,
more
they're-
credence.
yeah, they-
But the
well,
park plan is just the beginning.
Right,
Right.
but that's another thing that will come up, I know, for September Square.
So I think that the process then is the Parks Master Plan contains, ultimately, it will contain what will be the plan that will come from HLC. So again, it's a collaboration where we document it in one place, and that's a documentation of what the HLC has come up with. And then to Scott's point, put the boundaries around, say this is what falls within the boundaries of what we're trying to protect, this falls outside of it. It doesn't mean that, like, I know that that there are some people that hate the parking, there's some people that want the parking, and so things that fall within that, we just have to have a conversation about.
Okay, all right, well, and I'll take that back to Brianna and HLC, and we'll come up with a listing. The other thing that's on here, you see plaques for historic structures?
Yes.
Okay. Y'all see the little black house frame that's on some of the houses? They're not on all of our all of the houses that are on our list. Those came at one point in time from the Chamber of Commerce. When they started the walking tour that's in the guide, they provided those. So it's on some houses that are listed, it's on some houses that aren't listed on the thing. We would like to, if Phil, we can find, the Zinsmeyers never called me back. We're looking for somebody to get a price to duplicate that so we can get them on all of the houses that are on the 96 list.
And you're offering to the homeowners to put on the houses, and the
Yes.
city council, you're asking the city council to pay for that.
At some point in time, if we find somebody that
What's the
can
cost per plaque?
I don't know yet. That's
could
what
be
we're
a couple
trying to
of
find
dollars.
somebody, we're trying to find somebody to make them.
Are you trying to get in touch with Zinsmeyer Structural Steel?
Yes, and they've never returned my telephone
I-
call, so
I got a phone number if you want to swing by the store tomorrow.
we've.
And an email.
I called once and I had a name, but
Yeah.
he never did call me back.
Yeah, I swing by the store tomorrow
We
morning.
don't know what they would cost. You know, we may be able to raise the money some other way to do it, but it's something that would readily identify our historic houses and add to the fact that people are walking around looking for these houses and want a little more information, you know, about, well, when was it built and so on. So that's one of the things we'd like to look at doing if we can find somebody that can
Yeah,
replicate.
just swing by the store tomorrow morning.
Has anybody reached out to the people in these? You said there's 57 that don't have plaques?
Yeah, I went around to took pictures of all the houses and all the plaques that they had on their houses. And there's about 57 of them that are listed that don't have them. Now, it wouldn't be something we would make somebody put a plaque on.
Right.
We may think about, if we can find it, going to each one of those owners and saying, do you want a plaque? Will you buy a plaque? I don't know how much they're going to cost. I don't know, you know, they may say, yes, we will, but.
They might want to do it just because it's
But-
something that's
That
honoring
will
the place.
identify their house more readily, but it might be that, you know, because we don't have any money. But that's one of the things that we would like to look at to enhance the
I
houses.
think it would be an enhancement to our community.
So since that would be under advertising or tourism type thing,
Tourism, maybe?
could that come out of the hotel motel?
I like the way you think. I don't know, but we can find out.
Well, it's also something that
I
we
think
could
let's
do.
find out how much they cost.
Right,
And then
right.
we'll figure
We'll
out
find out
how to
what-
pay
what
for them.
they
Because
cost.
Okay.
I agree with Jared. If I lived in one of those houses, personally, depending on the cost, and it can't be too terribly expensive because it's just a black outline of a house, right?
Oh,
right.
I'd be willing to pay for it out of my pocket because it's bragging rights.
That or
And we can
bronze?
do
I live in
that.
an old historic house.
That's why they bought it.
So Herb had a comment?
I'm opposed to the city using tax money to buy those placards. I think it's a great project for the Chamber of Commerce in conjunction with the owner of the property, but I'm totally opposed to using tax money to buy those.
And why is that?
Why is that? Because it's not an appropriate use of tax money.
Why not?
It's benefiting a small group of people that have their own property and their own desires to make them historic and to preserve them, and it's their job to pay for it, not the taxpayers. There's a lot of people in this town that don't share what appears to be a very common approach to preserving history. There's a lot of people in this town that don't give much of a care about that kind of thing. And we have an obligation to them too. They pay taxes. So I don't think we should just say, because it's nice and it would be good for, I know you can build a good case for advertising. You can build a good case for advertising for almost anything. But it's, in my mind, the properties should be taken care of by the property owners and the civic organizations that support them. It is not an appropriate use, in my mind, for tax money.
Yes, please.
Herb, I understand what you're saying. I have already a marker, so we're not talking about me getting a free one. But it's a tourism thing. The city pays for these historic walking tour signs that are around town. And to me, if we could get it under the hot funds thing, which I think it would
Don't
fall,
we
but
pay
if
for
we
the-
could, then it wouldn't be city taxes.
Didn't we pay for the printing of the advertising for that too?
Yeah, or you're asking what?
Yeah, there was something else you approached me about a while back. We printed some historic, there was a printing that was done that the city paid for.
Oh, that's for the tourism of the historic structures here.
Right.
Yes, the Steinbach House.
And historic preservation and marketing the historic attributes of the city of Castroville is a strategic objective for both the city council and the EDC currently. That's something the collective council and the collective EDC board both voted on. And I think you may recall the survey I did soon after I got here. We get kind of that word diagram and historic. But I hear what you're saying, Herb. I mean, there are some people here that are like, not only is Alsatian not important to me, but hey, maybe I'm of Hispanic heritage, and something like 30% of our population was Hispanic, even way back then. And some of those families, guess what, are sixth generation here. So there's a whole nother group that isn't being, that I can see may have some other concerns. But be that as it may, I think we'll wait and hear how much they cost, right? And then maybe see if the homeowners want to pay for themselves.
Other ways of funding.
I
I'd be
think
happy
there's
to.
a lot of ways to fund it, and I would be remiss if I didn't point out the irony of the fact that we just committed 6 figures to heating a pool for a small number of people because we felt like it was a benefit to the community. I believe that there is a very small subsection of people that feel like that's a very important thing, and there's probably a large subsection of people that feel like historic preservation is a
I
thing.
don't think that's appropriate, that you should even bring that up for this meeting.
No,
It's got
I
nothing
believe
to
it
do
is.
with this.
It actually does, so.
Because you're going to bring that argument up every time somebody disagrees with your opinion.
Noted. So the point is that I think that there's more than one way to skin this. I think
Let
that,
me get a cost.
yeah, I think we get cost.
We'll
And
talk about it again.
I think that also partnering with like Castroville Conservation Society, coming up with fundraisers, we can work with them to do that. We can look at using tourism funds for it. It should be paid for out of something that lends itself toward that, but I think there's a lot of different ways to do that.
And I'll bring the chamber into it too, you know, because it was theirs initially.
Yeah.
It's something that they did initially. The last thing on here is realtors' disclosures on historic properties. We have a problem, I mean, it's not a significant problem, but when we're getting a lot of out-of-town realtors now that maybe get one of the houses under their purview to sell, and it's not disclosed to them that it's on the list, people buy them, they want to do something to the outside, bam, they're stopped. Nobody told us. So we're working with, I just want to let y'all know, we're working with Brian Persine on what he can do through the MLS that way. But we also are going to have to come up, or we want to come up with a packet that if a realtor approaches somebody in the staff and they're going to try and sell a house in town, that we've got a packet to fill out, because it is against the law for them not to disclose that that's a historic house that's under ordinance. So that's another problem we're working on.
I wonder if there's a way to flag it in
Does that
our
ordinance
utility system.
constitute an easement?
An easement?
Yes, you're basically giving the commission control to some degree over that property. I do believe that would be classified as an easement.
Oh, I don't know. I've never heard it.
Sydney?
And if there's an easement, that can go into.
That can go in the public record attached to that property.
So if you have an easement, so basically, when you sign your seller's disclosure, when they do the title search, they'll see that as an easement
It would come up in the title search.
in the title search.
But
right.
you need to do it
encumbrance-
before
an
they
encumbrance.
get into
I don't
the,
think that it would be necessarily be an easement, but certainly perhaps
But an
do
encumbrance.
something in the property records, puts everybody on constructive notice. The problem is that even if we have a packet, even if we find a way to flag it, the city's done all it could with those things, because at the end of the day, that's a private property issue, and so it is from private, you know, and so if you homeowner comes to the city and says, I didn't know, not my fault, and we say, gosh, you should have really informed yourself, because that's, you know, it's an ordinance, it's something on the books.
I think you hit on it, though, when you said put it in the public record. We can take the list and put it in the public record with addresses and legal descriptions, and then when they do a title search, it'll pop up and be attached as an encumbrance.
That was actually, so when I purchased my property, I have a historic cemetery on it, and that was listed by the title company
Because
as.
cemeteries, yeah.
Right.
Because those are required to be listed, yes.
So
do you know
according-
for a fact we can do that? Or do we need to research that?
We need to research it just a teensy bit, but it's not too far off of what I think we can legally do.
Yeah, so I think there's multiple ways,
Okay.
Priscilla, we can try to attack this. One, I think we can flag the utility bills. I will tell you, April's God's gift to like detective work in the city. If someone,
They took the big sign down that wasn't supposed to be up at Steinbach House. Did you know
okay,
that?
so there is,
Oh, the pumpkin patch.
yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that she finds out about. It's not not because she knows you, because they come to her first.
Right.
And so that I think flagging the utility bills would help if we can get it in the county record. If we figured out what we can do and how we can do that, that will help.
would help
We can
us.
put it on our GIS system as a layer, so that when people are looking at GIS, I mean, like you said, I think we can try. There's probably multiple ways the city isn't doing it presently that we could try and do it. But at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is Cindy, you heard Cindy say, this is a private property matter. While it may be law that it has to be disclosed, there's lots of things that legally the people have to disclose, and
Right.
anybody who's been in a real estate deal knows that those don't always get followed, and the only recourse to the buyer is to sue, right? And very often that doesn't happen. So, but we can do more, and I think those are great ideas.
Okay, we need to, because the people get very upset.
On the law, Cindy, who would be held responsible for not disclosing? The homeowner that's selling, or the realtor?
Yeah, that's what Brian indicated, that the
Homeowner.
homeowner that is selling it, if you really went to court or something, should have disclosed that, but I don't know.
But then it would be on,
On that seller's disclosure notice, so that you.
Well, Brian found it someplace when he was looking on the state one.
Okay.
There's something on the state that's, the state puts out that they have to fill out, that is a place for, but what kind of disclosure there should be
so
on
out
it.
of consideration
my-
for time, should we maybe direct,
I just got one recommendation where I was
please.
going with it, my
Sure.
point. So, we have that wonderful newsletter we send out with our bills, utility bills and everything. Put a, did you know? Did you know that if you own a historical home and are selling it, you must disclose it?
We need
Did you
help
know
with that.
sprinkler systems have to be backflow tested every 2 years? Just a did you know? That way we're not pointing out just the historic landmark owners. We're just doing a do you know, refresher for people.
and I think that's a great
That's
suggestion.
on here because we need help with that. Brian is really helping us on the realtor side
Right.
of it. But
Realtor,
yeah,
title company,
it's a
that kind of thing.
It's a disclosure thing
Okay.
that needs to happen.
Do you feel like, so is that something that staff could help us out with figuring out how to approach that?
I think there's
Okay.
two or three ideas that were shared that we'll pursue, getting done.
Okay.
Okay, is that clear?
We'll come back to y'all when we get a list of what we want to see in the parks, for sure,
Okay.
that we want to go into the ordinance. Okay?
Great, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
And I do want, out of a point of personal accountability from myself to Councilman Dyer, I do want to point out the fact that even though we don't agree on things, the one that I had mentioned was a council decision. So this was something where I was bringing up a correlation. Please, I hope that did not come across as a direct derogatory thing, because that honestly
I
was a council.
apologize if I offended you. but
No, not at all.
it strikes me that that's not a good comparison.
I just wanted to call out the fact that that was a council decision that I stand behind. Okay. All right. Great. Good discussion. Next item. Next item is discussion and direction on city water management, conservation, and ownership policy. So the next two items, just to be clear, Councilman Dyer has been on top of making sure that there's a lot of things on policy that he's really been pointing out, and this is something that I wanted to give you the opportunity to discuss, and then we've got some backup behind that.
Thank you. I feel like we have a lot of good technical direction in the city for water use because we have to comply with the laws and the policies of the sellers if we want to buy their water. So we have a very good system for doing all of those technical things. And Scott was very kind. Kathy got me copies of all the documents, and I read them, and I think they're very comprehensive and they're very current. And I compliment the staff for what they're doing. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is these people at the table, us, and policy. It's our job to tell the city what the city water policy should be. And I feel like the water policy the document doesn't exist well enough right now, and I'd like to just throw out as an idea that we perhaps ought to look beyond just the technical things that the sellers require us to do and TCEQ require us to do and the water board. Those things we have to comply with. But there's other things, and I thought I'd just mention a couple of them for you to think about, because I don't expect us to do anything about it tonight. But in the day-to-day management of water, if you compare it to the discussion we had at the last council meeting, we talked about general fund balances and utility fund balances. And we thought those things were important enough to agree on a 120-day reserve. I feel like water ownership is just as important. I believe we as the council should understand how much water do we own, how much water rights do we own, how much is enough, how much should be kept in reserve, and we should have a regular review on some periodic basis where the city staff gives us a report so we can feel comfortable that we're okay. And I think about this kind of a disaster. What if somebody poisoned the Edwards Aquifer and they had to shut it down for 6 months? Do we have any policy that says where we would go for water, how we would get water, how would we get it here, how much would it cost? Do we have a contingency fund? We know we don't. I don't believe we do. So those type things. I don't want to get in the business of telling the city how to do their job, but I think it's our job to tell them we want these policies to be followed. Like, I don't even know in the city who the director is that I would ask Scott, who's responsible for monitoring the water and telling us when we have a problem. On the area of acquisition rights, I think we have a very good set of directives built into our ordinances. When people want to put annex property and build developments, they have to bring water rights. And I think that's pretty good policy. The only thing I ask the city council is, are you personally comfortable with 0.612 acre feet per LUE? Do you know how it was developed? I sure don't. I look at it, I read the ordinance, but it's very cloudy. And so I would like to have a clear understanding of how do we as a council reach that conclusion that that's the correct amount of water that should be in an LUE. Then on the third area is water conservation. And I admit, Edwards Aquifer provides us with guidelines very clear about what we have to do as the pool goes up and down. But what's very unclear to me is the only thing our ordinance says is voluntary. It's voluntary.
What is voluntary?
For the users. It's voluntary if they want to comply or not. And I would ask Scott, we've been under stage 4 now for several months. Have we had a 40% reduction in water usage during the times when we've been under stage 4?
No.
Okay. Then what are we doing about it? We as the council should be doing something. If the voluntary nature isn't good enough, then we need to create a policy that says we have an obligation and here's what we're going to do. I don't know what we should do. Something we should figure out. So the voluntary nature of water conservation won't always work. So we should have a policy that helps Scott reinforce it. The last issue is water ownership policies. The value of water fluctuates. Water is going to be like gold in the next 10 years. Take a look at the Colorado River. There's only 10% of it left. When Las Vegas doesn't have any drinking water, the lower Colorado River Authority is going to have a problem generating electricity. So water is going to be like gold, and it's going to get more expensive. Do we count water as an asset in our city assets? Do we count those water rights? Are they worth anything? Are they on our balance sheet as an asset? Can we sell them? Yes, we could. Can we lease them? Yes, we could. But should we, or do we, is the policy issue. We don't have a policy that says in good years and we have extra water, we should lease it to make some revenue. In bad years, when we're getting close to the lower limit, we should be going out and buying some. But I don't believe we have any of those policies. So my suggestion to the council is, and to the staff, is we ought to start thinking about this. I mean, we're getting close to the end of the summer. It's probably not going to be a big issue this year, but we're on the verge of stage 5. But in the future, I think we could do better as a governing body if we try to put some of this in writing. That was the only issue I wanted to state. Thank you.
And to me, I really don't think that there's a question that this needs to be done. And we've talked about this quite a bit. We did look into, so the way that the Edwards Aquifer Authority, the way that they deal with the water conservation is it is a reduction during that period of time by that percentage. Looking at that, looking at our actual utilization, looking at the number of water rights that we have, we looked at that to find out if we were in any danger at all, like for emergency, something that would say we need to bring this to the forefront right now. And even in this year of drought, we're pretty safe when it comes to water rights. But I do believe that we need to, there's a lot of things that we've done just historically just because that's the way that we've always done them. And I think that every single one of those deserves a second look at it. I think it's an annual review as a part of the other reviews that we do. So there's a starting point. I don't know that our urgency on this is that immediate. I think that we need to. So I think as a council, we just need to decide when do we actually, because this is going to be a pretty substantial amount of work that I would say needs to be done. I don't know that it needs to be done like right now, but I think that we need to determine what that time frame is. I would say a year from now is probably too long. A month from now is probably too short. So I would say let's have a discussion on what do you believe that time frame needs to be. The other thing would be in terms of assets. They are assets, and this is something that we've talked about quite a bit. How do you leverage those assets? Is there a way? There used to be a greater way to leverage those assets, to lease them off temporarily and reclaim them. Part of the strategy is the water requirements that we're asking from developers. Quite honestly, they are more than substantial enough to be able to handle our needs long term. And part of the strategy is to overbank water so that when you're in that reduction, it kind of offsets some of the lack of reduction. But there are other ways you can do that, like escalating on gallon usage. I believe that SAWS does this. During times of drought, from this utilization to that, there's a certain amount, and then it starts getting higher and higher as you
Rates
start.
go up per thousand.
Right. And
We
you
have
take
that now.
regular
It's in our
domestic-
system.
But we could do it even more.
We could do it even more, right.
Yeah, we could do it more to make
During times
it
of drought.
noticeable on your bill.
Right.
So one of the things we are looking at, and I appreciate Councilman Dyer bringing this to the forefront, because there's so many things that are important that may not seem urgent, right? But they'll become urgent.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're urgent, it's the wrong time to try and figure it out sometimes.
Yeah.
But there are, the staff is working on a conservation document. Our conservation document, I think, is from 2012, if I'm not mistaken, and it's outdated. So it is time to adopt a new one. It may not be quite that old, but it's older than it's supposed to be. So staff is working on that, and when we have a draft, we're going to bring it forward for
Well,
review.
will that draft, because I asked you about the commercial side of it, because with I've had people approach me, they're like, well, we're supposed to be conserving water. Why are the car washes still going?
Because they recycle water.
They recycle water,
They
and
use
there is
recycled water.
So we're confirming that. That may, if you know that for a fact,
Texas
that's
law
great.
requires it.
Yeah, but
That's why
there's,
you see the signs that say no excessive mud, because they have to clean those pits out.
yeah. So,
In SAWS.
there's recycling and then there's recycling. I think they're, like so we looked it up in SAWS, yeah. So we're referring to what other people are doing, and we want to verify what people are doing here. But I know that, for instance, the hand car wash down here, I don't know if they're recycling or not, but we're going to find that out.
But in our code, it's not limited, and part of the reason it's not limited is because we did borrow heavily from SAWS, and it actually says in our guidelines, hey, we're utilizing the San Antonio water systems guidelines in Castroville. And they have, in their designation, they've designated, they've actually given their car washes as kind of a stamp of approval, and if they meet that stamp of approval, then they aren't limited on their usage. We have not done that here, so that is something because of her bringing this up, is something Kathy and I were discussing, so she's looking at it a little further, and when I have an update, I'll update you all on where we stand.
Yeah, that way people know, because like I said, they come and they're like, well, what about the car washes? What about businesses? I see the water running new.
But Herb is right, like there's a certain amount of recycling that car washes are supposed to do by state law. I think that's correct.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great. So what, for staff, what is our time frame for putting this together? How long do you think that this would reasonably take to put together without?
Well, we've got the holidays.
I've been
Where's the
told there's a list that one of our staff member keeps of all the things that are need to be done that haven't been done yet. And so this goes on that list. I think you all need to set an expectation of when you want it done, and we'll just do our best and reprioritize things if we have to, as far as when to bring it back. But in reality, we have this meeting, of course, and the next meeting is November 8th. We are going to talk to you all about doing a special meeting on November the 29th. That's a Tuesday. And then we have the December 15th meeting. So in total, we have 3 more meetings to the remainder of this year.
I don't think we should do it this year.
And
I think
then-
that it's something that maybe, 6
months.
6 months. I think it would be fine, yeah.
Maybe we can help. Maybe we can help draft something.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Whatever, I know it's one of many things.
Well, and I think that putting something on it where it's just putting a bookmark and saying, this is important to us, we need to address it, giving staff enough time without overwhelming them and having to reprioritize things, do you think 6 months would be?
Yeah, I hope we're out of this drought in 6 months, frankly, but who knows? I mean, one of the things that I will work to get to you as soon as possible before the end of the year is a report on where we stand on water usage, because I'm fairly certain that not only have we not reduced, but we've actually increased water usage, water consumption, which is terrible in the middle of a drought.
And in the ordinance,
And-
can we put, okay, we'll give you a warning first. If you don't comply with that, we're going to fine
I
you.
was going to say, I'm pretty sure there's actually, even though it says voluntary compliance, there actually is, there is citations that can be issued.
You know what?
So for all of those that are in violation, have we issued fines?
No.
Just
There have been
drive around on the weekend and look at all the yards that are being watered.
Oh, I know.
You know?
That's,
Well, that one,
let's do
remember,
two things.
it took about 4 weeks to get done, but one of the reasons that, one of the things that we did that I think is an improvement is those signs that are now been created, and there's 2 different signs. And I think simply putting those out, one, lets people know, because before it was, I mean, I had a hard time keeping track of, okay, is this a watering week or not a watering week? And the other problem is the way we do it by address, well, okay.
It's confusing.
Maybe I know when my day is, but do I know when my neighbor's day is, and when the guy, as I'm driving on the block, is that his day to water? If it's not between 7 and 11, then I already know that whoever it is, doesn't matter if it's their day or not, well, they're not following the guideline. But was this a watering week or not? So those signs, I think, will help educate the public on hey, this is a no watering week. And that also makes it a lot easier when people are driving around and you see a sign and it says no watering, and then you drive by a house and they're watering, that's a gimme. We can call on that one right away.
but that's watering with sprinkler systems. You're still allowed to hand water.
Yes, yeah. I'm talking about the.
I
people
understand
That's
that,
falling
but-
within the guidelines.
But a lot of people come up to me at the store, well, wait a minute, it says no watering. You can water by hose still.
That's right.
There's still that,
But it's hand watering.
that's hand, yeah, well.
So how about if, maybe something we can do quicker because we still are in this drought condition, is maybe come back with a staff enforcement policy, because we have people driving around town all day long, almost every day. So maybe we set up a staff policy where staff has the ability, if they see irrigation going on, that they just take note of it, and they can memorize when this is happening, because they do this pretty much every day, whether it's police or whether it's streets or whether it's utility. Maybe you can come back with a policy from city staff of how we'll do that. And then on the other side, let's do a policy on the escalating water rates increasing those during a time of drought. And I think that should be pretty straightforward. Do you think we can do that maybe by the next?
Well, I think that second one, that drought, that needs to be part of a larger conservation plan, in my opinion, and that's what we are working on, is a conservation plan.
So maybe we just start
that's
with
already
the
an effort,
enforcement.
but I think we're going to take that as whether, if it's not being contemplated already, we'll add that to our drought contingency plan that we're updating. But yeah, as far as an enforcement plan, I think it's great that you're giving us that opportunity, because frankly, it's going to boil down to what the capacity is for the city to do that enforcement, our staff. So we'll get to that.
Okay. Does that work? Yeah. Okay. So I think that the direction is come up with a staff enforcement policy by next meeting, and then we'll do 6 months. So what are we now? We're
Two other cities I work in, because they're really reasonable on what they